It's Thursday, October the 12th, and there's definitely a lot going on in the world and in the news. A lot of people are paying attention to what is happening in the Middle East and how that is continuing to dominate the world's news and all along those lines. So we'll definitely be talking about that. We'll be talking about other things as well, but we'll be definitely seeing what is going on in that space. The Gaza power plant is out of fuel as Israeli troops are massing near the border, and Israel is saying it is refusing to restore power to Gaza until all hostages are freed, and says every Hamas terrorist is a dead man. So that is definitely what is going on. It might be spreading that particular war because Israel has struck two Syrian airports and Damascus has activated its air defense. So that is another thing that is going on as Israel attacks airports in Aleppo and Damascus. So that is something else that is going on in that part of the world. And Israel and Hezbollah are exchanging fire across the northern border. So that is something else that might be adding to the expansion of that particular war and all along those lines. So we are definitely seeing that as well. Definitely, Israeli officials are saying that the government cannot confirm babies were beheaded in the Hamas attack, even though that was something that was being reported in some cases and all along those lines. And Europe gave Mark Zuckerberg, the person behind Facebook, 24 hours to respond about Israel Hamas conflict and election misinformation. And I think they had done something similar to Elon Musk. So we'll see how these tech giants respond because Elon Musk X rebukes EU allegation of illegal content and are saying that that isn't the case. So we'll see if that is the case or not the case. And of course, there are various efforts to rescue American hostages from one of the most dangerous places on earth. And that is definitely something else that we are seeing in the news as well. So definitely that is a lot that is taking place. And I understand that there is some things going on even in terms of a new unity government there in Israel as they are forming that unity government as they are launching this war and all along these lines. So after days of indecision, Netanyahu and Gantz have agreed to establish an emergency war government. So that is something else that is taking place. And apparently, the Iran president and Saudi crown prince speak for the first time since their ties were restored. So we are seeing that as well in that part of the globe and all along those lines. And there was a warrant for a certain individual, and that being the Russian president. And apparently, he is arriving in Kyrgyzstan on a rare trip abroad. So, this is his first known trip abroad since that arrest warrant was issued. So, that was the arrest warrant, I think, issued by the ICC. And we'll see what happens in that regards and if there's any consequences to him making this particular trip and all along these lines. So, it looks like citing German responsibility for Israel's security, Schultz is offering military aid. So we're seeing some military aid being offered in the Israeli conflict as well. So we're definitely seeing a lot of things within the news surrounding Israel, the rescue or the attempted rescues of trying to get to the hostages. And apparently, Mr. Trump is making some statements that are not exactly giving him favorable notice from even his own party and all along those lines, because apparently he said some things about the current attack and everything. And DeSantis is definitely going out against him and all in that space. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. But the Biden administration says they won't take anything off the table in terms of refreezing the $6 billion Iranian assets. So definitely, that Biden is facing calls to block Iran's oil, even if gas prices are to soar if he was to do that. And of course, we know that they're still trying to find a Speaker of the House, and House Republicans have chose Scalise as their candidate for Speaker after McCarthy's ouster, but apparently he's still scrambling for some votes in order to make it official and all along those lines. But as I was saying, Mr. Trump attacked Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu over Hamas surprise attack and called Hezbollah very smart. And Ron DeSantis slammed Donald Trump for calling Hezbollah very smart and all along those lines. And one of the things that I had forgotten until I was doing some research on news on, I think it was yesterday and everything, was that there was a time that Netanyahu and Putin were apparently friends and had some allyship and all along those lines. And I want to say that even Putin had offered to kind of um, intercede when not Putin, but Netanyahu had offered to intercede within the war in Ukraine and actually kind of do some mediation in that particular conflict and all along those lines. So I did see that when I was looking up some news yesterday that there was a time that they were actually allies. I don't know where they stand right now because I haven't heard from Russia their views of this particular conflict, but I did know that they were friends at one point and all along those lines. So it'd be interesting to see what folks have to say about that. If Sasha comes in, he may have some thoughts around that as well. And an Oklahoma judge sent over 500 texts during a murder trial, and that judge could be removed for office and all along those lines. Don't know why you would be sending text to Bellows during a murder trial, because that is definitely something that I would think would not be allowed in the court of law and all along those lines. But maybe Nick will have some thoughts around that and all in that space. And there was a tornado down there in Florida. It looks like a possible tornado hit down that area around the Palm Coast, and it looks like it's left some damage behind and all in that area. And maybe Nick has some thoughts around that too, since that was one of his old stomping grounds and all along that space. And it looks like there was a incident in Atlanta. 2 were stabbed, including a police officer in a security terminal at Atlanta International Airport. And I know that sometimes when Lee comes on, he talks about how it's not just gun violence, but it can also sometimes be knife violence as well. And there is a video showing police arresting a woman accused of stabbing 3 people at that particular airport. So in this case, it was not gun violence. It was knife violence that was going on in that space. And definitely we know that the trial with Trump is still going on as well, that civil fraud trial and all along those lines. So we'll definitely be seeing what folks have to say about that as well. And if many people may remember Carly Russell, she was the one that apparently had that kidnapping hoax. And looks like there was a ruling in that case, and it looks like she's going to be appealing her guilty verdict and all in that space. So definitely they're trying to keep her out of jail after she had that whole hoax that was going on as well. And New York Republicans are finally ready to expel George Santos. So it looks like they are seeking a resolution to expel George Santos, and we'll see what happens in that case as well, because that is another political thing that is going on as in that case. And the U.S. judge has upheld the suspension of the rights to carry guns in some New Mexico parks and playgrounds. I don't know why you'd be trying to bring a gun into a park or a playground in the first place, but that's just me and wondering those kind of things and all in that way. I understand that there are 2 spoiler candidates, and we might be talking about this in the later on world politics, but we do know that RFK has launched a candidacy as an independent, and I understand that there is a Republican candidate that has also launched a independent candidacy as well. So one of those candidates has launched their candidacy, even though another one has dropped out of the race, and that one, who his name is slipping me, but I'll come back to that and everything, has thrown their support behind Nikki Haley. But there is a Republican that is getting ready to run for that whole seat in terms of being the president, but being as an independent. So we've got 2 independents, and this isn't even counting no labels, because with no labels, that'll be 3 independents. So we got 3 independents running against both what the presumed favorites are, which are Biden and Trump, and all in that space. So we'll see how this all plays out. Just like we'll see how the Supreme Court plays out as they're hearing a key racial gerrymandering case, which is just down the road from us, because they are hearing that case that is around South Carolina's redistricting. And as many folks know, me and Nick and some of the others on this panel are here in the North Carolina area, but we're going to see what happens in that space and all along those lines. So we're definitely going to see how that plays out. And it looks like red states are trying to curb social media, and some folks are wondering about Montana, whether its TikTok ban went too far, because definitely that is what folks are going to be hearing as well, because judges are to hear arguments from TikTok and content creators who are challenging Montana's ban on said app. So looks like Montana is definitely having that go on in that space. And it looks like Governor Newsom over there in California has signed a wave of tenant protection bills into law. So, new California law, one of them is aiming to force people with mental illness or addiction to get help. So, I guess they're going to basically almost have them mandated that they have to go get help if they are suffering problems in that particular area. So, like I said, I'm going to bring in our folks and see what they've got to say about a number of the things that are going on in the world. You'll be glad to know, if you're in California, that they aren't banning Skittles, because I did hear that they were banning that particular dye. I think it's red dye number 4, and Skittles and other things may have that in them, but it doesn't look like they are banning Skittles altogether, even though it may have that as well. So that while that potentially harmful chemicals used in many cosmetic products are banned by California governor, it doesn't look like they have totally banned Skittles. So if you want to get your Skittles on, you can definitely get your Skittles, and all along those lines. So like I said, going to bring in our various folks, including one of the co-founders of the network, and all along those lines. So definitely bring in Nick, also bring in Sasha Starr. We've also got Shaquille with us as well, and roads and all in that space. So we'll see if anybody else joins. But I guess if you're coming to California, Shaquille, you can still get your Skittles on, and all along those lines. So you can still get the Skittles if you choose to, and all in that kind of way.
Well, what I found very interesting in your talk, Mark, your Walter Cronkite 10 minutes, all you do is report the news as opposed to opinion, which we can jump in for the opinion now and forget the news. Red states banning social media. So this goes back to why is Biden spending $50,000 per home to deliver internet services to podunk places in Montana, when then they go ahead and they ban the internet. So it just doesn't make any sense at all.
They're not banning the internet; they're banning TikTok.
Do not give them, if they want the internet, let them pay for it. If they want to ban them, let them pay for it. But please do not take money out of taxpayers' houses, which is what Biden is doing. Go putting us into more debt, which Biden is doing, to supply internet to Podunk, Montana, who's going to ban it anyway. So anyway, that was my talk.
Nick, a quick question. If in Montana there wouldn't be roads to travel from the certain houses to highway, so the idea is those who need this road, let them build it and pay for it.
That's
state
right.
is not supposed to. Is it correct?
Yeah, I mean, I traveled. I've been in and out of Montana from Missoula. I spent several nights there, Billings, Bozeman, all the place. It's a beautiful country. Part of the reason to go there is to get away from the internet. Okay. The problem is the Democrats will spend every dime that they have. And
oh, you're not answering my question, though. You're not answering my question. My question is very simple. Consider that there is a houses, Montana, a few households.
Yeah.
And there is no road that would allow them to travel from their houses to highway, to the nearest highway. Would that be responsibility of state to build that road, or the people who need that road would have to get their money together and build it themselves?
Usually it's the state that builds the roads, but since I was on the roads, but it varies. Since I was on roads and grounds committees for 3 years, in homeowners associations, a lot of cases we own the roads, we build the roads in our own POAs. But then the county will also build roads, and then they're owned by the county. Then, believe it or not, the city will build roads, it's owned by the city. Then the state will build roads, it's owned by the state. And the federal government will build roads, it's run by the federal government. Then at the same time, they all sue each other and send the bill to the taxpayer as to who owned the roads. I've been down that road before too, working for the city attorney's office in Miami Beach. I'm going, what's going on here? The city of Miami Beach versus Dade County. Both of us are hiring a bunch of lawyers. Who's paying for it? Taxpayers are paying for it. They don't even know that they're paying for attorneys in states and cities and counties to sue each other, and then they're sending you the bill. I mean, how would you like me and Mark to get involved in litigation? And then what we do, Sasha, is we send you the bill. How would you feel? Not too good. But let me tell you, in this country, all across the country, daily, attorneys are sucking money. I'll tell you, I got dismissed from the city attorney's office. This is about they're sucking money out of taxpayers as they sue each other, and they send.
But it's a different issue, though, because in today's 2023 and soon 24, the internet is just the same necessity as roads, maybe even more so. Absolutely. How you can live today in United States of America, 2023 without internet. I disagree with that. You may say that Biden should work on a scheme to split it with counties, with state, with households.
Look, if you want the internet, you go pay for it. Okay, and if you want to live with I live in a high-speed internet. I have 5G. Okay, but I live in places on purpose where I can access it, and I pay for it. I don't run out to Podunk, Wyoming, and then ask you, Sasha, to foot the bill for my 5-speed internet.
Hey, Nick, it is my understanding that there is, during the pandemic, many people got, because of what Sasha's saying, there was a feeling that there was a need for internet. Many people got their internet service for free, and as a matter of fact, many of those internet services are still continuing for free, even to this day and everything, because they do think that it is a necessity and all along those lines. So there are a number of folks that have gotten their service that is free, and they've had it free for several years. I mean, that could change at some point because we apparently are getting into the pandemic, but that is definitely something that is going on. That's a liberal person that knows a little bit about the internet.
Attitude. You know, Mark, see, that's the attitude. It's free because we're paying for it. It's not free. We're paying for it. We're going into debt to pay for it. Our grandkids are going to debt to pay for it. But here's the problem with the Democratic Party. Any person who cries, "Oh my Lord, I don't have whatever," the government doles out money for nothing, and they should ask for something in return. If you want the internet, you want a high-speed line, sign a bloody note and pay for it yourself. I mean, Lord. This whole idea that the government, you're going to suck the government, is just awful, which is part of the reason I was Republican for many years before I switched back to the Democratic Party. But now I'm looking to go back to the Republican Party because what they're doing is stupid. I mean, what they're doing is they're basically sending America so far in the hole that you will be another Venezuela. Oh, well, let's talk to our liberal friend in Australia. You know.
Well, I'll just give you a quick couple of updates from Australia. So we have the referendum on The Voice in Australia on Saturday. That is a proposed constitutional change that would recognise our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, or the First Nations people, in the Constitution and give them a voice that allows them to advise Parliament on matters that affect them. The Yes campaign has made a good argument for it, stating that this would help ease some of the racial tensions in Australia between these two groups, between the First Nations people and the rest of the country. But where they haven't made a very good argument is that the exact functioning of The Voice isn't in the referendum. It'll be determined later by Parliament. And the No campaign has been very, very vocal about not voting for something when you don't know what the actual workings are. I think both campaigns have been interesting. On the Yes side, which is generally the more liberal side of Australian politics, we've seen high-profile people, especially Indigenous people, who have had death threats against them because they've advocated for the No position. On the more ultra-conservative side, we've seen people who have gone to Yes rallies and made references to Nazis and, sort of white supremacist stuff that we normally see on the TV in America. So that sort of behaviour on both sides is absolutely unacceptable. When it comes to the referendum, you need to have at least 50% of the entire country by population, and you also need to have at least 4 of the 6 states agree. I don't think it's going to get up personally. I might be surprised, but I don't think it will because I don't think they've got the numbers for it. Also, I'm currently in New Zealand, and I actually have some friends from California, family actually from California that are visiting New Zealand at the moment. But we also have the election, the national election in New Zealand on Saturday. So it'll be a very interesting time for politics here in Australia and New Zealand, this part of the world, on Saturday. And for those people who are watching now, we do have a joint combined session between Edge Radio in Western Australia and Pod TV on Saturday to cover the election coverage for Australia and New Zealand, and anybody else that wants to watch. I'm not sure if you're aware of that yet, Nick, but you are now. Now, I just want to make a brief comment. I think it's interesting when we have our disagreements politically. Tax rates, the right amount of social services, the right amount of government spending, etc. But I think that each of us should thank our lucky stars. Thank God, if you believe in God, that we live in the luxury of the very wealthy and relatively safe Western countries that we live in. What is happening right now in Russia and the Ukraine, and what's just started happening now between Palestine and Israel, is absolutely shocking. It's horrible. And we are so grateful, I think, we should be so grateful that we are unlikely to ever experience what these people are experiencing. So I think we should take a moment to reflect on that. And sometimes, whatever criticism we have of our own countries, we should be grateful for what we have.
We're now experiencing a moment of silence.
Since, deafening silence. Did I say something really good or really bad?
but you're absolutely right. And one problem you have in the Middle East is dispute resolution courses. I think everybody failed them. And so we're not doing good in dispute resolution. But I'll tell you, my thoughts about this is it's going to get worse. It will not get better. And it's going to get worse basically for the people on the Gaza Strip. Netanyahu isn't going to take this sitting down. I'm expecting an invasion within a week, and they're just going to level most of the Gaza Strip. But by the way, the Gaza Strip looks like it's kind of old and decrepit anyway. So maybe it should be.
When it comes to our commentary in Western countries on what's happening over there, I've never been to Israel or Palestine. I don't think anyone else here has been. We don't live there. We don't really know.
Maybe Sasha
has, but we don't really know all of the issues that the people feel, not what we feel about what's right and wrong, but what the people feel. But I'll say this: I've been absolutely stunned by some of the reactions that we've seen. We've seen this anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic sort of flavour to things. We've seen rallies in the United States. At the Sydney Opera House, they had a protest there where they were actually saying "gas the Jews." I was gobsmacked when I saw that the fact that would happen in the middle of Sydney City. That's just such a shameful thing for us to have had in this country. I think what's happening in the United States is terrible. But then people start talking about politics. If you watch Fox News, one, they've picked on Rashida Tlaib. What is she supposed to do? She's Palestinian. She's not going to be supporting the atrocities that's being reported, but she's Palestinian. Don't hold that against her. She's the only Palestinian in there. Okay, I don't agree with her politics, but I don't think that she should be picked on by the right the way that they have been. And then you watch Fox News and other right media, and they're talking about defunding the police and Black Lives Matter and all these other issues. All those issues are domestic issues. We'll talk about them. We'll hopefully come to a resolution. We may never agree, whatever. But those issues have nothing to do with this conflict in Israel and Palestine and on the Gaza Strip. So I really think that our media, our political leaders, our celebrities, everybody else should not take away from the atrocity that's going on over there and just leave our domestic politics out of it. That's my personal opinion.
A question for, not so much for you, Shaquille, but it's really for Sasha, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, and I had forgotten about this earlier and everything, but apparently there was a significant relationship, and I guess there have been some pressures to play on that relationship between Netanyahu and Putin and all along those lines. So I just wondering, what was that nature of that relationship? Because apparently they were friends at one time. Apparently one time he was, meaning Netanyahu, was trying to even play as an intermediary between Russia and the Ukraine and all along those lines. So had not heard about this until recently, but apparently there was a friendship that existed between them, or at least a cautious friendship, for lack of a better term, and everything. And that is something that has even come up in some of the news conversations that I have seen as well. So, what was that relationship, and does the relationship still exist, or did just these two attacks kind of like just totally demolish that relationship? Because, like I said, I was surprised to hear about this relationship, and like I said, I don't follow everything in the world, but apparently there was a attempt for him to be an intermediary at one time or another.
No, it wasn't intermediary efforts what characterized the friendship. The friendship was part of triumvirate between Putin, Trump, and Netanyahu. They are three so-called strongmen who rule their countries and effectively perceived as very strong regional leaders. Well, in case of the United States, it's not regional, it's a leader of the whole world, or at least free world. Now, once Trump got out of picture, at least for now, the Putin and Netanyahu relationship was that Israel was very cautious not to support Ukraine because it would aggravate the relationship. So-called, although a relationship, it's not a friendship. It's, yes, you're right, it's a relationship, could very quickly deteriorate. And Netanyahu, understanding that position of Israel is quite troublesome because it's been for years now, for 75 years, if you will, is surrounded by sometimes unfriendly, most likely hostile nations, who started at least 5 wars, which they lost all of them. And they also have continuous terrorist acts. Forget about the ones that happened on October 7th. That's something different. And so Israel always was to protect itself. And Israel was mindful of the fact that Russia, which traditionally supports all these hostile to Israel countries, not because so much they're in Israel, but because indirectly they're all against free world, and particularly the United States of America, countries like Iran primarily, and many others. So that's why Netanyahu, without feeling great devotion to Putin, but he trying to have a calculated policy toward Russia, a main thing was not to alienate Putin, so he would support enemies of Israel even more. However, after October 7th, situation is now changing. All of a sudden, Netanyahu, who was in the last several months, if not years, he was very unpopular in Israel, especially with his the judicial reform or so on. There were demonstrations. The army was against this reform, most likely. All of a sudden, after October 7th, all these disagreements are gone, done. Israel is fully behind its government, and the first obligation of government of any country in the world is to protect its citizens. So the first address, forget about judicial reforms or anything else, this is now not even first or second, not even 7th or 25 matter. No. The matter now is ability of Israel to protect its citizens. So when they called reserves, they want to call 300,000. They have now 360,000. There are lineups for people to sign. There are people who are flying to Israel to be enlisted from South America, from North America, to Europe, from Europe, all over the world. So it's unprecedented support of Israeli government. And Netanyahu, believe it or not, since he is now the head of the government. So you cannot support the government without indirectly supporting Netanyahu. So now all that clicks together. So speaking about Hamas, Hamas was encouraged. It's not officially proven that Iran actually participated in this attack. No. It remains to be seen whether it was or not. There are also, again, unproven information that so-called Wagner group prepared Hamas fighters on the bases in Syria. And they taught them how to deal with civilians, how to kill them. That's what they were doing in Ukraine. That was done in Israel. Apparently, what was done in Israel is unprecedented in the history of the world. Because in one kibbutz, 70 people were killed, among them 40 kids. Of them, more than half of them were beheaded.
And if those reports are accurate, that is just, I mean, all of us, again, we should be so thankful that no matter what we fight about in our countries, in relation to our domestic politics, none of us will ever likely go through that sort of atrocity. And you know what? People say to me that Palestine has a point. People say to me that Israel deserves to exist. Whatever the argument is, I think you can have an argument without doing that.
Yeah,
if those reports are accurate, that is an absolute inhumane. I can't imagine what would drive somebody or drive a group of people to do that to another group of people. That's just totally.
Whether that is
I can't really believe what I heard yesterday in one of the reportings on CNN, right from Israel in real time. There was interview with the father of a 9-year-old girl. She was missing. And he went and he was trying to find out what's her fate, whether she was killed or she was taken hostage to Palestine. And finally, it was confirmed to him that she was killed. And he says, yes, that's what I wanted to hear. I couldn't even think about her getting abducted and being tortured, raped. At least she died in dignity. Can you imagine?
That's just so heartbreaking. It's so heartbreaking.
Very heartbreaking. There's no doubt about that and everything. But like I said, there have also been reports. I mean, that's the whole conversation that the EU has put out there to both Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, that some of these reports are not as factual as we would like them to be, and everything. And I'm not dismissing it.
But we're in the middle of a war, so some of the reports are going to have some inaccuracies. That's just the way things are going to be. But again, I'll just say, sorry, just over anyone say something. Again, I'll just say, somebody whose politics I don't agree with at all, Rashida Tlaib. I don't agree with her. I don't agree with the squad on their positions. But the way that the right have gone after her, she's Palestinian. She has now come out and objected or said that this is not something that she supports and denounced it. But the fact that they got her as she was walking out of Congress and things like that, what is she supposed to do? She doesn't support that, but she is Palestinian. And there's a difference between Palestinian and Hamas. So I thought that they were really unfair to her personally.
And to tag on to that, because Shaq, you're right on point with that. Is what's going on is when we talk about that area, we have to be specific. We have to hit those specifics. We cannot say, and Sasha, I mean, just when the gentleman said he took it to Gaza, he was afraid of what Hamas was going to do. We have to be specific on that, because one of the things that Fox went after the squad over, again, which unfairly, because there is a growing hatred of the Palestinian people. And we're forgetting about that in this war as well. The Palestinian people in that Gaza Strip aren't Hamas. And those Palestinian people are also being murdered, killed. Hamas is using them for human shields. For example, in that same CNN interview, they went on and showed how, the area of Gaza, of these apartment buildings that were destroyed, they weren't Hamas planning areas. And then it's hard to tell the Palestinian people who are in disagreement with Hamas and hate what's going on as well. It's easy to say, hey, you guys should just point out where the Hamas bases are. Well, how can you tell somebody thinking, just as you were talking about, Shaq, our Western ethnocentric viewpoint, hey, it's easy to tell them, just point out where the bad guys are. Well, those bad guys have guns to these individuals' heads. Those bad guys violently took over the country and have people there. If I point out where these bad guys are, I'm going to get killed and beheaded the same way. So we have to forget that and drop all the politics. We have to realize what's going on is an atrocity. Everybody's against Hamas. They are a terrorist organization, and we understand that. But we can also, as people, understand that the people of Palestine aren't just collateral damage. They're people. The innocent people in Israel aren't just collateral damage. And if I'm saying that, hey, we should worry about the innocents in Palestine just as we worry about the innocents of Israel, I'm not saying down with Israel. I'm saying, hey, that's life. Why are we so blindly saying, okay, well, this people should live and now let's kill all these other people? That's ethnic cleansing, and that's glorified ethnic cleansing, and we cannot do that. So we have to worry.
Well, I think we in the West hold sanctity of life to be a very important fundamental ideal of our value system. And as I said before, we can argue about all sorts of other things, domestic politics and all that sort of stuff. But I'm reading these media reports, and it's not just what I'm getting from the United States, but all over the world, where they're bringing up things like Black Lives Matter, or they're bringing up defund the police. And like, oh, well, because the left want to defund the police, the result is, we accept this bad behavior in our countries, and so therefore, look what's happened in Israel. Look at what's happened in the Ukraine. It's like, cut it out. Stop it. We can argue, as you and I often do, Jatovia, about race relations and all those other things. We can argue about that, but I would never do to you, and I assume you would never, I know that you would never do to me, what we've seen over there. So we're very lucky that we can argue about how much funding, how much taxes, all that. We can argue about that. We are so blessed to be able to do that. What's going on over there is atrocious, and the media should stop it. The media should stop bringing up irrelevant issues. What is happening there is absolutely unacceptable, the same as what's happening in the Ukraine and Russia.
No, I agree with you. Hey, Shaquille, just along those same lines, one of the things that has come out in this report and everything is that there may be, as I think Jatovia was kind of alluding to, blame on all sides and everything, because there are reports out there. Now, whether these reports are confirmed or not just about the ethnic cleansing, but about warnings that were given, because apparently Egypt, which is an ally of the United States and an ally of Israel, had apparently given a warning about this attack 3 days before the attack took place, and there have definitely been some other reports that this might have been. We praise the intelligence and the amount of intelligence in terms of military intelligence that Israel has, but there is some reports that this could have been one of the most massive fails of all time, because apparently they were given some warnings, but maybe they were a little bit too sure of themselves and everything, and maybe they didn't take credence to what some of these reports were and all along those lines. So I don't know if anybody else had heard that, but I've been hearing this for
Well, I've heard that, but before I respond to that, Sasha wanted to say something. So, Sasha.
I have a question to Jatovia. Jatovia, have you seen the clips from CNN where the Palestinians, not Hamas, Palestinians, were clapping and dancing when Hamas went through Gaza with the abducted Israelis? There was one woman an elderly woman in her wheelchair. She was going through the Holocaust. So she's Holocaust survivor, and she was a monk with kids in cages. They were going through Gaza, and Palestinians were dancing and clapping. So now you want to tell me the
Sasha,
Palestinians are
Sasha, to answer your question, that does not represent all Palestinians.
Okay,
Did you see the Palestinians?
okay, I understand everything what you're going to Sasha, tell me when last time you or anybody else here on the panel saw Palestinians
did you see the CNN clip?
Are against Hamas.
Sasha,
who?
Did you see the CNN clip of the 11-year-old girl who is bloodied in the face, where she said she woke up to bombs and couldn't find her sister? She was Palestinian. Is that okay by you?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. There is a crime and there is a punishment. And I'll tell you, there will be a lot of civilians killed in Gaza. You can count it as collateral damage. You can count them as the sacrifice because they voted for Hamas in 2006. So they were supporting
Hamas was a violent takeover. I told you that before.
Come on. I don't want to hear that. There is a crime, there is a punishment. Full stop. No, you don't tell me anything.
So you are calling for ethnic cleansing.
I'm not interested. You can call it.
You are calling for ethnic cleansing.
I'm calling for punishment.
You are calling for ethnic cleansing.
Okay. Let me be very specific.
Sasha, are you saying
Hamas
that
has to be gone. There should be no word Hamas for next 500 years. Now, Palestinians, if they're against Hamas, okay, they will try to escape. Now they're working with Egypt. So Egypt never allowed Palestinians, by the way, to cross border to Egypt. Nobody needs Palestinians.
No, hold on a second. That's not
no
the case.
One.
But actually, hold on a second.
They're trying to let's hope they will. Let them all go to
Jordan and Egypt. So there are conversations about letting some of them into the country. Now you're also saying about the spread of the war, Sasha, and everything. I just said you remember.
No, it's not spread of the war. It means punishing.
At the beginning of the news, I said that there was attacks on Saudi Arabia.
Which
and
were
there was attacks from Lebanon. So this is an ever-expanding war and everything. But I also said on yesterday, hold on a second, Sasha. I also said on yesterday that there is division even within, and I think that I can't speak to it as much as other people on the panel. I think that if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, Shaquille, that you have some relatives that are of Muslim descent and all along those lines. But there is a vast division even within the Muslim community. There is Sunnis, there are Shiites. It's even here in America, there are Muslims that are behind Farrakhan. There are Muslims that are behind W.D. Muhammad, if you want to go at the American Muslim kind of attitude and everything. So there are various divisions within the Muslim community. I don't think that we can group and lump everybody in that same category. One of the things that we talk about on this show quite often is this notion of every group being homogenous and everybody being alike. And like we've even said that about not every African American.
Let me just disabuse you of that notion straight away. This is not an Islamic Jewish issue. It simply isn't. Okay,
that's what it is.
And especially the Muslims that live in most parts of the Middle East that I've been to, which are more westernized, like the UAE, Qatar, etc., and all over the rest of the Western world. This is not what Muslims believe in. Okay, what we have is a group of people who are abusing religion to do what they want to do. Palestine has had all sorts of interference from other very powerful and wealthy countries in the Middle East, such as Iran, telling them that they'll never recognize Israel, so that you can't have a two-state solution. And Sasha, I get what you're saying. I think it's very unfortunate, though, that there are young Palestinians for decades now who are growing up in this type of environment, who are being taught hate from the very, very early ages. It's very unfortunate that that's a situation, and how that is going to be addressed and corrected, I don't know. But it is not a reflection of Muslims in general. And again, at some point, I think you should look. How long is this going to go on? I'm almost 40. I turned 40 at the end of the year. Palestine and Israel has been an issue my entire life. I really hope it's not going to be an issue when I have children, if I ever have them, or my grandchildren. How long is this going to go on? And at some point, something needs to happen. Now, war is ugly, and if Israel reacts, which they're going to have to, and the West reacts to this, there is going to be, unfortunately, a loss of otherwise innocent life. But we can't allow this sort of thing to happen. And can you imagine, talking about the woman that Sasha was referring to, she's obviously quite old. Can you imagine living through the Holocaust, finally getting some freedom in the only Jewish state in the world, and then potentially dying or being held hostage by these monsters? Can you imagine going through that?
Shaquille, I would like to clarify something. Everything what I've said before, I never said anything about Muslims. I really don't. I agree with you that it's not a question of a fight between Jews and Muslim people. Not at all. I'd like to say something that in order for Hamas to commit and do things what they've done, they have to be A, financed, B, encouraged, trained, and so on. So there are incredibly strong forces behind all of that. And now there are a lot of suspicions that Iran is behind it, a lot of suspicions that even Russia is behind it, or at least the Wagner group who trained them. There are some unsupported commitments of even country like Qatar, because it's a very rich country and they could support. But again, there is no evidence of that. We're all speculating on that.
I don't think Qatar would. But.
Yeah, probably Qatar wouldn't. But I want to tell you one very interesting thing. So if you believe that people like Hamas, let's see, some people call them terrorists, some people call them freedom fighters. Do you remember there was probably the greatest Palestinian freedom fighter was Yasser Arafat? Anybody remembers such thing? Yasser Arafat was a great freedom fighter. Now, guess what? In 2004, when he passed away, for
was a billionaire.
For 1 month, there was no announcement about his death. Why? Because his widow and relatives and other people, they had to divide a fortune of $2 billion. How is that freedom fighter could accumulate $2 billion? I'm wondering how much money already accumulated the leaders of Hamas who don't live in Gaza. They have incredibly wealthy villas.
Hold on a second. People are constantly funding people that are in wars in that situation. I'm sure that Nelson Mandela probably had a significant amount of money. Matter of fact, I know he
not like that. No, but not like that, Mark. No, not like that. What we saw with Yasser Arafat, there was a report that came out. I was a teenager when he was around. I remember a report coming out saying that he was actually paying the families of suicide bombers with counterfeit US dollars. But regardless, here we are in the West questioning how much money the Bidens have got. Was there potentially corruption? You've had another Democrat who's been accused just recently of corruption. Here we are in the past questioning whether George Bush and other high-ranking and high-profile Republicans were somehow making too much money. And what are we talking about? Tens of millions, 50, 100 million? All of a sudden, we've got the leader, if you want to call him that, of a place like Palestine, walking around with billions of dollars. His family members all had hundreds of millions of dollars. And people over there are so poor, like they're barely scraping by. What is going on?
I mean, but
it's just
again, I think that is a
similar, like Hugo Chavez and other. I mean, that's the way corrupted governments end up running, with the money flowing to the top, where they siphon everything on the top. And correct me if I'm wrong, Shaq, with that. Like with what is it, Chile? Yeah, with Hugo Chavez, where he pulled the oil money out the top, and then yes, the country itself was poor. And so,
one of the other really unfortunate things that we see is not just charity money, but also when food and medical supplies and all that are shipped over to these countries, the powerful people get
Yep.
a lot of that for themselves, and then very little trickles down to anybody else. So yeah, we know that we see that, and we don't see it to that degree in the West. But yeah, what a significant issue. How do we stamp this out though? Because unfortunately, to just pivot slightly away from the war, unfortunately, I think we are becoming less influential and less powerful in the world because we're not engaging with the world as much as we used to. Now, Donald Trump actually had a lot to play with that in the United States by having the America First sort of anti-trade policies that he had. But we've also seen other types of policies, like with Obama, where he started to restrict, US people having bank accounts outside the US and stuff like that. So there's all sorts of things like that I think have just slightly weakened us. I don't think that we're involved enough in other countries. And something I've been saying now for most of this year, on this show, is the criticism of the United States and other countries when we're told we shouldn't be in the business of nation building. But who
Shaquille,
is? Who
I had
should
a
be in
question
that
for you,
business?
and was based on what you just said, and it's actually going to another part of the world because there was a assassination right in our backyard and everything, and that was in Ecuador and everything. And apparently, the 6 Colombians that were accused of involvement have mysteriously been killed in that Ecuadorian prison, and all along those lines. So, is that a case of something that we should be getting involved in? Because that's literally in our backyard and everything, meaning that there has been conversations around the escalating security crisis, and they're having a security crisis there in Ecuador, and that's literally in our backyard.
I think you have to be prepared to fight diplomatically and militarily for the things that you stand for and the things that you believe in. As much as Jatovia and I have disagreed, but we seem to be agreeing a lot on this show, but as much as Jatovia and I have disagreed and argued on previous shows, there are certain things that we both agree on. Should we all have freedom? Should we all have liberty? Does everybody, regardless of their skin color, sexuality, gender, etc., does everybody deserve equality, and does everybody matter? We all agree on those things, right? And we agree on those things for us after thousands or tens of thousands of years of human history. We've gotten to this point where we have all agreed that the best way to exist is with liberal democracy, where we have socialized services, we have a relatively free market, free capitalist markets. We've sort of come up with a blueprint, which is better than we've ever had before. For all of the conflicts that we have, for all of the political disorder that we have, we've come up with something pretty good. And those countries that haven't adopted those policies, those are the countries that we're seeing human rights abuses, lack of freedom, a government, dictating everything that you do. That's where we're seeing that. And so the question is that if we are going to agree as a world with the United Nations, and prior to that with the League of Nations, if we're going to agree as a world that these are the standards and here are the rules that everybody has to play by, and then we turn a blind eye or we don't intervene when we see somebody or see a country doing something wrong, what do we really stand for? Now, the criticism of that is, well, should we impose our morality on those other countries? Well, I say, if we really believe that what we're saying, if we really hold those ideals to be true and valid, yes, we should intervene. Yes, we should impose our morality when we have to.
And I think one of the biggest things, because, where we agree here as well is, the intervention. But the problem, and this is where we agree as well, is the fact that after that intervention, what do? We leave. That creates a vacuum. Who's going to fill that vacuum? If we don't intervene and then have that humanitarian aid, have that education, have that communication and keep those lines going, then what happens? Nothing. That void gets filled with power-hungry individuals that take over the governments. And then, hey, guess what happens again? You got another Hugo Chavez who takes that millions on top and the country is steadily poor. No, we still have to be there in the sense that we've got to have that communication line. We've got to have, hey, look, what can we do to not truly nation build, but yes, nation build. And we've got to understand that we've got to keep our fingers there just to make sure that, hey, what questions do you have? Let's help you build, and then we're going to take the lead. Because I think one of the problems when we left Afghanistan, we didn't have that built or stable. But
this is part of the problem, and it even comes back to the Palestine. And I know we're winding down. I was going to get to what was going on in the U.S. with the speaker, but we can deal with that on world politics and everything. But that being said, is it part of the other problem that exists? And it kind of comes to what both you, Jacoby, and you, Shaquille, were saying, is that sometimes we are willing to turn the blind eye to some people because we are seeing them as an ally. I'm thinking about what we did with Venezuela, what we did with definitely a couple of other deals that were out there, and there have been both Republicans and Democrats that have done these deals because they are seen as a military ally, and therefore we are willing to turn a blind eye to some of the injustices that they are involved in and all of that space because we see them as being a strategic ally, and we will not we might call them out on a call or on a phone call, but we don't really press them on some of their issues and everything.
Well, I think part of the issue is the United States, the depiction of the United States as being the world's, the world police or whatever. I think that's actually unfair on America, and it's unfair on American taxpayers, right? The Five Eyes Alliance, which is, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the United Kingdom, and the United States, is a very, very strong alliance. They should be making decisions together. And the whole world should also be making decisions together. They shouldn't just be requiring the United States to always step up to the plate. Everybody should get involved. And Europe, I think, is dropping the ball majorly on this issue. So yeah, I think we do need to do that. The other thing I'll just say is, unfortunately, we are seeing such a huge amount of political division. And I'll talk about your country because you're all American or Canadian. What are the Republicans doing? You've got the Republicans sitting there saying, well, why should we be supporting Ukraine to this degree? Because, it's an issue between them. We don't want to have a proxy war. This is terrible. How much money are we going to spend? Fox News was talking about this even when Tucker Carlson was still there. Why are we going to spend all this money when we're all in all this debt? But then when it comes to Israel, all the Republicans are like, yeah, we're going to spend all this money. Make up your mind. Make up your mind. Do you want to get involved in foreign issues where you think that there is a human reason to do so or not? Now, at the moment, if we're going to talk about domestic politics in the United States, I think Nikki Haley is making herself look really great, not as a presidential candidate, but certainly as a VP, because she's got that foreign experience. She was the former ambassador to the United Nations. I think she's looking really great. Is Donald Trump going to be the president or the GOP nominee? He probably will, but my goodness, America can do better than that. But of the candidates that are on the stage, who else do you want? And as for the Democrats, people are suggesting it would be Gavin Newsom if Biden doesn't make it or doesn't run. Then they sit there and they argue about all this stuff. You don't have a speaker. Now you've got Scalise rather than Jim Jordan. They still floated today the idea of, yesterday for you guys, the idea of having Donald Trump as a speaker. Like, all this crap is going on. And then sort of as an offhanded remark, it's like, oh, well, it's the Democrats' fault because they've mishandled international affairs that this stuff is going on in Israel. And the Republicans sitting there going, oh, well, we're going to do this. We're going to spend more money. We're going to get more military intervention. Just stop it. If there's anything that you should be able to put your differences aside for, especially when they're bullshit differences, political differences, right? Put them aside when it comes to something as important as what's going on in the Ukraine and what's going on in Gaza.
I agree with you. And I would like to tell you that Republicans who are trying to say no more help to Ukraine and explaining that they're trying to please their voters so they will be elected next time again. But voters, a huge majority of voters in the United States are for help to Ukraine. And especially now when Israel and Ukraine are in the same boat. They are fighting the same enemies. It's Russia, it's Iran. They are behind attack on Israel. Israel, by the way, it was very interestingly enough that Americans keep a certain amount of ammunition and weapons in Israel, their American weapons and ammunition, when, if required, so they will have to use it. When they opened now, after October 7th, this spaces where the weapons were supposed to be, there was no weapons. All these weapons were sent by Israel to Ukraine a long time ago. It was done in secrecy, so not to get the vengeance from Russia. So they were saying that all they do, they provide to Ukraine humanitarian help, which is true. They're providing MDs to help wounded Ukrainians, which is true. But also secretly they provided weapons and ammunition. Now, when this happened on October 7th, Zelensky was the first world leader who called Netanyahu and said that Ukraine is 100% behind you, and if you need any help, we are ready and fight. In spite of the fact that we are fighting Russia, we are going to help you any way we can. So right now, that probably explains why the proposal now is to treat a package of help to Ukraine and Israel as one expenditure, because there is enough weapons to supply both, and especially most weapons that Israel needs, they're different from what Ukrainians need. So
but again, Sasha, I don't think it's fair that the United States has to shoulder that burden disproportionately. I mean, the GDP of the European Union is huge. Okay, they should be. If all that happened was the European Union and all other wealthy Western countries contributed the same percentage of their GDP, right, as what the United States does, you would have a much stronger position, and also you would actually decrease US expenditure. It's just not fair. I mean, look at what's happened with Germany and the rest of Europe, actually, for that matter, that the United States is having to pay to defend them while they're not paying and their economies have grown. It's just not fair on Americans. I'm not American, right? So it doesn't make a difference to me personally, but I just think it's an unfair situation. And by the way, if Israel's weapons stockpiles are depleted, and we know that the United States is not manufacturing very much, today compared to history, what is the exact status of the US military equipment, their planes, their tanks, their technology? Is it outdated? Because I know that some of their equipment is really old. Is it outdated? If something happened, if, for example, China or another hostile country was to come in and start to attack something that was important to the United States, what capacity does the United States have? And the problem, the real issue there is the United States is depleting its resources, financial and otherwise, while the rest of the world, by large numbers, are just sitting around and doing nothing.
But Israel doesn't need our help, guys. Israel will invade Gaza Strip. They will take it over, and by next week, all we're going to be talking about is Israel's invasion of the Gaza Strip and taking it over.
Well, with respect, Nick, Israel wouldn't have the ability to do that if it wasn't for the massive help that we've given them over the decades.
They have 235,000 reservists on the lines.
No, I know they have tons of reservists, but it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, everybody here on this panel and everything, but I don't know that a lot of times when we go into war or when people go into war, they are not always prepared for the type of war. And it's my understanding, like I said, I'm not into the country, and I will admit that I've never been to the country, but I understand that there is an entire tunnel system that Hamas has that is booby-trapped and everything. So I don't think it's going to be as easy as people think it's going to be.
Netanyahu has an IQ of 180. Netanyahu is not a stupid man. He's got a master's degree from MIT. And the Israeli army is organized and ready to go.
Just quickly, talking about MIT, what is going on with these student bodies and these universities and colleges in the United States making these really, look, it's one thing if you want to show some support for Palestine, whatever, I'm not going to get involved in your political beliefs, but what is going on with these young people who know nothing about these issues, making some of these really depraved, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel comments? What is going, and this is happening at Ivy League universities. What is going on over there?
Hey, come on. They're trained as little kids in the mosque to hate Jews.
I'm talking about Americans. I'm talking about Americans going to American Ivy League schools.
They're born into a hatred family. In other words, they're trained as little babies to hate other people. That's what's going on.
What's
and
happening?
And Netanyahu knows this. Netanyahu is not a stupid man. By next week this time, here's what we talk about: how much collateral damage took place in the Gaza Strip, because he's going to take his people. They're going to go in. Remember, it's a tiny little place with 2 million. He's got 235,000 reservists, maybe 300 at the border.
Dismiss
guerrilla warfare. Both of these things
could be worse than Alabama running through Mercer.
Let's go to Jatavi.
Just to touch on both of these things, right now, and Shaq, what you're talking about is, or what's going on across this country, is that yes, there are a lot of people that are picking sides, and you have a lot of people that see images that. The one image that Sasha was talking about of the woman and the Palestinians cheering, and that are picking and going blindly behind Israel and saying, yes, Israel should wipe everybody out. Then you also have other individuals seeing those in Palestine being, the Palestinians being killed and saying, okay, hey, they need to fight back. And this is what the Jewish people are doing to the Palestinians. So you have people picking sides. And because we aren't able to talk the same way we aren't able to talk about our political differences, people are picking sides and going to the extreme. And, hey, this is what we're going to cheer. This is what we're going to say. And then you also have the advent of AI and what's going on with the disinformation campaigns that get pushed out there, just how people want to go ahead and already blame Iran, even though there haven't been no evidence reports of that. So then you have people wanting to move on Iran already without having the reports of any backing happening. So you have people picking sides, not talking. And then because college campuses have the freedom of speech, college campuses are allowing both those that are yelling out anti-Semitic things and other people yelling out kill all the Palestinians. So you have a lot of hatred built up and people not talking and people not able to have that conversation. And the problem with the universities is they aren't using the power of their bully pulpit to say, okay, let's come together and let's educate on this topic and actually have a discussion and really think about what's going on in the Middle East and trying to create a true solution instead of
that's wonderful.
Let's go ahead and agitate and just keep creating this.
Wonderful. I would like to tell you something how all this
that's what's happening, and that's what's for example, almost done, Sasha. I was just going to get this out really quick. For example, people are jumping behind Nick Fuentes, who Fuentes is the anti-Semite, the racist individual that's put out a whole bunch of conspiracy theories about Israel. And people are jumping behind him, even though he's putting out just disinformation out there. So yes, right now what's going on is people are picking sides, and on college campuses, rather than, hey, let's talk, they're saying, speak your piece and let's go about our business. And that's creating hatred.
Let's forget about the college campuses. I really don't care about that issue. But I will tell you what's happening right now in Toronto. Yesterday, Toronto police contacted all synagogues, Jewish organizations, that the violence will increase in the next several days. Be vigilant, stay home as much as possible. This is what's happening today in Toronto.
Sasha,
I'm sure they were also in touch with the mosque.
Because they put out in the U.S. talking about how attacks could happen in the U.S. from the anti-Semitic views, and this is why people jumped on the squad, is because, again, to jump back to talking about where Shaq and I completely agree, it's about human life, and that's what's being lost, and we're forgetting about it when we're talking about war. The same human life that's being destroyed in Israel, those innocents, and that same anti-Semitic view that's being pushed out there is harming people, the innocent Jewish people. But that same anti-Palestinian attack, when you're forgetting that it's Hamas that's going, but you keep saying, hey, the Palestinians love Hamas. That's not true. You have Palestinian Americans that are being attacked for that same reason, for that same hatred. And if we could take,
but I think that's my point though, Jacoby. Like people have asked me in my personal life, especially after watching me on some of our shows, have said to me, why are you so passionate about politics? And I'm like, I'm not. I hate politics, right? The only reason why I know anything about politics is because I'm involved in economics and finance, so I have to pay attention to what's happening. But I'm not passionate about who's going to win the next election in the United States. I don't live there. So what I want America to be strong, but I'm not passionate about who's going to win and what policy America's going to vote for. So I don't really understand why young people or anybody really in America who's not from that region would take a passionate view on who's right and who's wrong, right, in this conflict. Because look, we know that Israel, for example, has offered land and has offered all sorts of things to Palestine over the years. We also know that Palestine has been lobbied by powerful Middle Eastern countries not to recognize Israel. This has been going on for decades. But for people who, especially young people who are just going to college, I mean, they're barely out of high school. Why are they getting so impassioned about this issue? I don't get it. Like, they don't know what they're talking about in the first place.
It's because some have Palestinian friends, some have friends from Israel, some know somebody from Israel, some are Jewish, some are, Muslim, and it's just, you get all these passions built up, and you see something and you want to get involved. And then you find your news outlet that you figure is the best for you, and that news outlet tells you to believe this. And then now, because I want to be on the side of right and righteousness, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and jump in blindly and go this way.
Well, that may be the case, but I really wish that didn't happen. I'm very passionate, for example, about Australia becoming a republic, or at least moving towards that path, so we don't have a foreign royal family as our head of state. But I would never, ever advocate for the murder and torture and abuse of those people. Neither would I call for the torture and abuse of people who didn't agree with my political view on whether Australia should be a republic. I've never felt that kind of, like when we've argued about police, right? I don't particularly like the institution of policing. I think it should be reformed in the Western world, and especially I think the judicial process should. But that doesn't mean I'm going to advocate for killing all prosecutors or killing all police. I mean, that would be absurd. I don't understand this level of hatred coming from young people who live in relatively peaceful countries, absolute luxury and freedom that we have in the West. What are these kids doing? Where are they getting this sort of ideas from?
They are. There is a new realm, and we can disagree with it or not agree with it, but there's definitely some young people that are taking the activism view, sometimes from their parents or from their grandparents, and there is definitely a rise in activism. I've seen it literally living right around the corner from Duke. I've seen it at Central, and there are certain issues that they are concerned about. Some of them are issues that we've talked about on this show, and we don't always agree on them, but whether it's climate change, whether it's race relations, whether it's a number of other things, and they are very passionate for whatever reasons that they are passionate. And I agree that they need to learn and study more around the issues and all along those lines, but there is definitely some passion that they have in these spaces.
Mark, the anti-Vietnam protesters, from what I can tell from the footage, because obviously I wasn't live back then, the anti-Vietnam protesters were certainly very passionate, but they never en masse called for the death and destruction of the military and the government of America and all that sort of stuff. They were like, hey, let's live in peace. Let's have some love.
There was some very militant
there was, but it wasn't the predominant expression. Here is different, because people who are supporting Israel or supporting Palestine are what they're calling for is very violent. We just had in Sydney City, which I would argue is the most multicultural place in Australia. Some people argue it's Melbourne, but we just had people at Sydney Harbour, like at the Opera House, one of the iconic buildings in the world, calling for Jewish people to be gassed. We just had that here in Australia. We just had a Jewish person in Sydney, in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, who was taking a flag out of his car at his house, who was threatened and told to put the flag back in or I'll effing kill you. right?
And
Where is this coming from? We don't have this sort of stuff normally, right? In America or anywhere else. This is not the normal way of doing
things. It's a new
things.
phenomenon, but I think part of it is because of the advent of social media, the advent of the democratization of the news media, because now anybody with a camera can give you their report on what is going on and all along those lines. So definitely there is some greater conversations that are taking place that weren't always able to take place in, say, the 60s or even the 70s and everything. So I do think that some of the social media and even social media inflaming some of the conversation is also what is going on as well.
There's that. Plus, the terminologies that are being used that you're pointing out, the gassing, that is in reference to, of course, the Holocaust. And the Holocaust happened a while back, but that hatred is still there and was just hidden under the covers. So a lot of with the social media that Mark is talking about and everything that's going on, and there's another reason why it begins to empower some individuals. Again, some individuals just hate Jewish individuals. There are anti-Semitic people that are out there, and those anti-Semitic people now have a voice. Have a voice. They can hide behind anonymity with the internet and social media, and they can create a following. There was, matter of fact, I was watching a piece about homeschooling and how unregulated homeschooling is. Mm-hmm. There was, and it needs to be regulated, but there's actually a group.
I don't agree with that, but okay.
Well, this is a
different debate for another show.
But this is a big reason why, for me, I believe it should be, because there is actually a legitimate homeschool that teaches Nazism, that is actually teaching about how to be a good Nazi in the U.S. It has more than 2,000 plus followers. It actually is a legit homeschool, but because of our own religion, everything. But that's that hatred that is out there. So you already have tons of people that have that, and so you put in the anonymity. You give them a voice of power. You give them a reason to speak and try and get more followers. So yeah, there's other reasons why that and the Jewish community it has been, in terms of based on religious hate. More than 50% or 50% or more of the hate crimes of that religious hate go towards that Jewish community. So there's that, again, that hatred is out there and it being empowered about what's going on right now. And then you got, again, people picking sides. You got the voice of the freedom of speech. You've got all this that allows you to preach out that hate now and feel empowered and saying what you want. So that leads to people yelling this out.
Yeah, that definitely leads to that. Get ready to wind down and everything. Toby, one thing I was going to say is that there is a flip side to that, because I do know that there are some homeschools that have some very, you may be surprised I'm going to bring this up, but there are some homeschools that have a very pro African or pro African American kind of twist as well. So there are homeschools on both sides, just like there are some that might be very much to the far right, like you were talking about. There are some that are mild to the far left as well. So there are.
Sorry, I just want to say again, Nazism and fascism and those sorts of things are not far right. Neither are they far left. I think that they fall into their own category. Okay, the idea of right wingers. And to me, extreme right wing means you really want no government, or just such a minimal government that government has no power really at all. Okay, that to me is where far right is. Far left is where you want a lot more government intervention. Nobody on the left, when the people on the right go, "Oh, what do you want? You want more socialism? You want to turn into Venezuela?" Nobody on the left is advocating to turn into Venezuela. Nobody on the right is advocating to have a country that was like Mussolini's Italy. Okay, nobody's advocating for that. So I don't think that we should use these terms far right and far left, because it diminishes actually the arguments that we really have. Jutovi and I will probably never quite see eye to eye on the right level of government intervention, the right level of tax, the right level of regulations, what should be regulated, what shouldn't be. Okay, but those are discussions that we can have, arguments that we can have. but he's not like far left and I'm far right. We just happen to not agree about those things, but there's lots of things that we do agree on, right? And that liberal democracy thing, the freedom for everybody, that's a fundamental ideal. We may disagree about how that's going to work, but that's a fundamental ideal that we all agree on. So I don't think this far right, far left thing is a good way of describing
and everything. And maybe that was not a correct terminology. I will leave y'all on a note of something that I heard that was interesting as we get ready to walk out the door. And I know this is something that y'all will not agree on and all along that line, but I did see that there is an interesting candidate being floated, and we can talk about this on World Politics at 5:00 as the VP candidate, even though he's running for governor. But there is some conversation around Mark Robinson being Trump's VP. So I did see that in a couple of news items and all along those lines.
That'll never happen. And I like the man, but that'll never happen. I think Nikki Haley's probably got it, but if it's not her, it's not going to be Mark Robinson. But I do want to actually ask this very quick question. If Nick's still back, maybe he can backstage, maybe he can answer this. With the talk of there being independent candidates, and most especially Kennedy, RFK Jr., if neither presidential candidate gets 50% or more, does that become a runoff in a federal election? I know that's what happens with state elections, but with a federal election, does that become a runoff? And has it ever happened before in the United States? Because we're not used to that, because in Australia, we have instant runoffs because you have preferential voting. So you get the results straight away. But you guys have a second election or whatever. So what happens?
You're not elected by the popular vote anyway. Hillary Clinton showed that when she trounced Donald Trump in the popular vote. You're elected by the Electoral College.
Okay, so, but if you don't have, but if you don't have the requisite number of states, if neither major candidate has 276, what happens?
Electoral College has to make the decision. So eventually they have to keep going into session and making a decision. Interesting though, because I'm running a LinkedIn Pod TV poll, and thank you all the people on LinkedIn watching. I just started the poll today, but we already have 400 people that are responding to it. I put Donald Trump, Joe Biden, or other. Who do you think's winning? Joe Biden, Donald Trump, or other?
Other.
Donald Trump.
Other by 60%, wanting somebody other. Donald Trump is number 2 at 29%. Joe Biden is like 16%. But
sorry, just back to my question. If no candidate gets to 276 and there's 3 candidates, you're saying that Congress would have to make that decision. You wouldn't have a second election like you would with a state election?
Yes. So eventually it would be, I think it gets thrown into the House representatives.
Yeah.
Without having another vote.
Yeah.
Without having another vote.
There's no election. But we could have an interesting scenario if you had a very strong third party candidate. It could be very interesting. Robert Kennedy is not a strong third party candidate. If you told me, hey, Mark Cuban's running, I would go, wow, you got a strong third party candidate out there. If you had Michael Bloomberg running, well, he's good, except he has no debate coach, and so he sucks on debate. But if a strong third party candidate would show up, they would win the election. They would be.
But you've got three independents. RFK seems to be polling reasonably well, but let's just say that RFK only took 10% off the electoral college votes. That 10% could still leave the other candidates without the 276. And it goes to the House. The Democrats are going to presumably vote the Democrats back in.
Controlled by the Republicans. So who are the other?
That's fair. That's true.
There's a Republican that ran, and I forgot his name right now, but there is a Republican that just announced that he was running and everything, and then you've got the No Labels Party. So it's 3, like you said, but it is 3 that I'm aware of.
The interesting thing about RFK is if he polls anywhere, the irony of the fact that we're talking about, the Jewish people and anti-Semitism and how it's affecting them, RFK has put out some anti-Semitic stuff.
Yeah, but so have high-profile members of the Democrats, and this was something that went against the Labor Party in the UK when they were having their election 2 elections ago. So I think Joe Biden did a really good job at that speech. I think it was a little bit late. He should have done the speech earlier, but he gave a really good speech. The question is, will the Jewish voting bloc be upset with the Democrats or be empowered by them? Because if they're upset with them, they may turn out to vote.
They'll be more upset with Trump because Trump took Nick Fuentes to Mar-a-Lago. And Nick Fuentes is putting out conspiracy theories and a bunch of anti-Semitic stuff towards Israel. in the middle.
Trump also moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He's done a lot of good things as well.
Yeah.
He took Nick Quinton after that. Also, the same thing with Kanye West. There's a lot of anti-Semitism that's come out of that.
I don't know what's going on with Kanye West.
Yeah,
he just lost his mind. What's going on with him?
But that's what's got put out right now. Is
that's the sad part about politics. You have to lose your mind before you run. And see, unfortunately, guys like Mark Cuban, unfortunately, is too stable. But if you get a guy like him, he would win the presidency. He'd beat Trump, beat Biden, because he is a real multi-billionaire, not like Donald Trump. And he hates Donald Trump because Trump beat him. He could never reproduce the Celebrity Apprentice, but then he did real well on Shark Tank. So he's really good in front of a camera. He's got name recognition.
But he never got the profile on Shark Tank that Donald Trump got on Celebrity Apprentice. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't really even know why Donald Trump ran. He was relatively popular, right? Why would you even run for the presidency? Just live your life. You're loaded. Whether he's a billionaire, he's worth hundreds of whatever he's worth. Like, just go live your life, dude. Like, what are you doing?
There's a three-letter word that everybody says is the reason that he ran, that he's running again.
Yes,
and everything else is called ego.
There's that. That's it.
Shaquille, do you have a goal, toilet goal? I mean, the guy has to have a goal.
But you know what? I'm egotistical and I'm ambitious. But there's certain things I wouldn't want to do. I wouldn't want to be a political leader because no matter how popular you are, almost half the population is going to hate you, right? And you cannot possibly get every single decision correct. You're always going to be criticized for the things that you got wrong and never remember the things that you got right. Why would you want to go into politics? Why would you want to do that to yourself?
He doesn't care about that.
We do have world politics coming on later on this evening and all along those lines. So, Nick, we're going to wrap this one up and everything, but we do have actually a recording of the chess show coming up very shortly, and actually a recorded version of Empowering You. So I've already put that in. So I can actually meet you at exactly 12, Sasha. So just let you know that I don't have that other conflict going on because they are a recorded show on this particular day.
Thank you.
No problem.
All right. Well, God bless everyone, and